call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an open meeting of the Seward, Nebraska governing body. The city of Seward abides by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act of conducting business. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is displayed on the north wall of this meeting room facility as required. Disclosure of the meeting recording process is posted in the meeting room. A participant sign-in sheet is available for use by any citizen addressing the council. Presenters shall approach the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record, and are asked to limit remarks to 5 minutes. All remarks shall be directed to the mayor, who shall determine by whom any appropriate response shall be made. The city of Seward reserves the right to adjust the order of items on this agenda if necessary, and may elect to take action on any of the items listed. Please call the roll.
Kaler.
Here.
Colterman.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Singleton.
Here.
Streisand.
Here.
Tanyas.
Here.
Wergen.
Here. All right, the first 3 items this evening make up the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Kaler, Tanyas, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Wergen, 7-0.
All right, item number 1, under administrative items, consideration of a request from Pivo's Tavern LLC for the approval of special designated liquor license application for an event at Harvest Hall on June 24th, 2023. Derek.
Yeah, so, as you may know, I get a lot of special designated liquor license requests from various businesses around the area. A lot of them from in-town ones for events, mostly at Harvest Hall, mostly in the fairgrounds, stuff like that. A lot of those we've been doing them for years, same locations, all that kind of stuff. Every now and again, like this time, we'll get a random one from another entity from out of town or a new entity, and they hadn't been previously approved with us. So we have this checklist that we started in 2020 for an expedited process for approving the SDLs. Usually if they've had something with us before, I can go through and say, yep, this is an approved location, approved vendor, good to go, sign off, and you usually never see or know anything about it. In this case, item number 3, this vendor has not been approved previously from council. So the recommendation from city administration is to approve them, allow them to do their event in June, and then if they have any more SDLs down the road, they'd just be approved like other entities. That's about all.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have a second? Okay, you have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'd say just one thing, so there's, in that third point, they haven't applied previously either, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I just wanna make sure.
Go there for Friday for fish.
If no further discussion, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor of Kaler, Tanyas, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Wergen, 7-0.
All right, item number 2. Items related to the Park Avenue Bradford Street Storm Sewer Improvements Project. Mike, you look like you're the star tonight. Look at this.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Item A, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, so we have 4 items related to the 2 projects, storm sewer projects. One Park Avenue at the bottom of the hill, and that's from 8th Street up to 6th Street. We'll be rebuilding the street, adding a couple of additional 42-inch storm sewers and replacing about half of the existing 36-inch and then restoring the pavement there. So we did receive the notice of award was approved on May 2nd by the City Council, and in the interim we've gotten construction documents or construction contract, and so that's all been signed by the contractor. It needs to be countersigned, so we're asking for approval from the City Council for the mayor to sign all documents. Item B is I'm sorry, I read the projects in order. The project B first. A is the Bradford Street storm sewer improvements project. That's from 10th Street, bottom of the hill, next to Hughes Brothers, up to 6th Street here. We'll be increasing the size of the existing storm sewer from roughly 12 inches, some of it's 18, up to mostly 36 inch. Again, that was, a notice of award was approved by the city council on May 2nd. And in the interim, we've received the construction contract filled out and signed by the contractor. And so we're asking for approval for the mayor to sign all documents. Both projects have a substantial completion date of July 1st of next year. The contractor has indicated that they would start both projects roughly in July, sometimes after the 4th of July. And so we anticipate the completion actually to be in this calendar year. So it's good that we've been able to move forward, and hopefully we have an early start in this project and an early completion. Item C is the engineering services during construction. This is inspection, testing, and other things to ensure that the infrastructure installed by the contractor meets the plans and specifications. So for the Bradford Street project, the estimated amount is $110,307. So the design engineer, Schemmer, is the engineer who we decided to select for inspection services during construction. Item D is similar to item C. This is for the Park Avenue project, or a larger project. The engineering services for that project estimated to be $182,420. Of course, these involve quite a few hours. They will actually bill on an hourly basis, and of course, if they are able to do the construction services in a shorter amount of time, then we pay less amount. And of course, we'd come back if the project extends a longer period of time, things happen, we need an adjustment to that amendment, we would return to the council for that. So that's items 2, A, B, C, and D for those two storm sewer improvement projects.
Thanks, Mike. Are there any questions or comments from the council on any of these items? We would I assume these just each require a simple motion. So whenever, if the council has any questions or comments, otherwise.
Do you wanna do them together or separately?
We do them separate. So we do 2A first, if you're ready, or we can continue discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve 2A.
We have a motion, is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Taylor, Tanya, Coltman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
2B, any discussion? Or entertain a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Taylor, Tanya, Coltman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
On 2C, any further discussion? Or entertain a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Taylor, Tanya, Coltman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
On 2D,
Move to approve.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Taylor, Tanya, Coltman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
Alright, item 3, consideration of a professional services agreement in the amount of $98,278.19 with the Schemmer Associates for design services for Lindell Avenue reconstruction project. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you. So this is for the design. We've already done geotechnical borings, and we've done survey work, and now we are asking for approval for the design of the project. This is the east end of Jackson, where it bends then onto Lindell, south to East Seward, and the intersection of East Seward and Lindell. So the amount not to exceed $98,278.19 represents 728 hours of estimated work. That number is conservatively high. It is a very narrow area. There's a lot of storm sewer, so we have to, at the intersection of Lindell to the north and Jackson, start the storm sewer there, carry it east and then south. There'll be several inlets, and then we actually have to carry it farther east at East Seward and into Plum Creek. So there's an extensive amount of storm sewer anticipated to be it's very narrow, anticipated to be congested with all the utilities that go down there. And so the price probably per foot that we would pay normally is a little bit higher, and that's in reflection of that. Of course, whatever it takes in design, we'll pay for the hours that are used by the design engineer. So we've had very good success with these other projects. Park Avenue in Bradford, we've had 4 and 5 bidders on those 2 projects. They were well managed. Carroll K as well was designed, it's currently under construction, and construction engineering services by Schemmer. So they've really done very well for us recently, probably the best design firm that we've had for our street storm sewer projects to date. So we're encouraged by their proposal here, and we ask for approval.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any questions or comments from the council? Yes,
I
Matt?
have a question. So as far as any future fixing or widening of East Seward Street, any plans would that impact what we're doing right now with that?
This is all in the concrete portion of East Seward. It does impact the intersection, so during design, we'd have to make some educated decisions, but basically, we'd be following the width of the pavement across the bridge and farther east, actually, to the dog park. And then it narrows up currently, and where that narrows up might change a little bit. But, you know, we do anticipate it to flow smoothly, right, and to be greatly improved, and of course, hopefully a lot smoother and easier for everybody, regardless of what direction.
So if we do widen and replace East Seward Street in the future, we wouldn't have to redo this part of the storm sewer?
Well, we'd probably have to do 10 or 20 feet, you know, so wherever we create the taper, so we'll have the same issue at East Hillcrest, and that project will be completing design soon and come up for bidding. And so at some point, you have to transition from the width of the new pavement and the width of the old. We'll create a transition that'll work permanently, but if there was any decision to widen further to the west, right, of East Seward, then you can accommodate that. So that's part of the design process, is working that out, where you allow yourself those options. But there probably would be 10 or 20 feet of pavement that had to be redone. And maybe just at the outer shoulders and the curbs, not necessarily all the center panels, depending on how it's constructed.
Rich?
Yeah, that street is kind of a composite asphalt at present with us, and the street crew's done a really good job of keeping that together without any containment. And at one time, there was some visiting with those people that live in that area. The width of that street is going to be, of Lindell itself, is going to be consistent with Jackson, would you say? I mean, is it the street width for Lindell gonna be similar to?
There's a lot of choices there, and it's probably going to be, it's probably gonna be roughly, I would imagine, 28 feet back of curb to back of curb. We do intend on putting curb on both sides. And sidewalk abutting, we don't normally put a sidewalk directly to the back of the curb. I think in this area, the right-of-way is so narrow, we probably have to acquire some right-of-way that will likely put sidewalk on one side only and abutting the curb. And then we probably have to adjust that pavement as narrow as possible. We wanna, well, we'll have to look at parking, and that all depends on what width of pavement we ultimately end up with. All that's really in the design process, and of course, we can certainly have in that design process updates as to what will happen with that. It's one of the more complicated. Usually we'll know in advance what we wanna do, and that one we're gonna pretty much have to fit the road to the available space.
There you go.
So it'll be a little bit of give and take, back and forth.
And the storm water actually has been a problem down there, in particular, obviously when it floods, because it's right there by the river, but even in regular storms, it doesn't have a real good place for that to go, and so it definitely will benefit the homeowners that are in that area, and just the overall safety of that road by not having those issues right there. Rich, you have something else?
Yeah, just kind of following up that right of way is important here because of the width that Lindell is now as compared to where it's gonna be after this design phase is finished. And then, I know the storm sewer passing under that area with all those collector points is gonna be another huge issue, so So, it's very important that we get a good design on that, so.
Sure, indeed. So I think Shemar is the team that's done the best for us on complicated storm sewer projects, so.
John?
So what side's the sidewalk gonna be on purple side, or is it gonna be on big, John?
It'd be on the west side, I believe.
Okay, 'cause there's a little more room, otherwise on the John side, you're gonna be about in this front.
Yeah, and that's probably gonna be, normally we would slope up from the curb at a 2%. We'd probably have to actually slope down, and probably multiple slopes down. I think overall, and so in front of the driveway, the house on the corner, likely we're looking at a trench drain perhaps, to keep the storm water from crossing actually into the driveway and down into her yard. Currently happens, and a lot of the loose aggregate kind of flows into her yard there. So we're trying to rectify all those problems.
Next question,
Mhm.
is this project gonna start after East Seward, Evergreen done? Are they gonna start that project after those two are done?
We don't have a start date on this. We hope to have this design done by November and be able to bid it this calendar year for next year. Highway 15 has been changed to a full 2-year construction period. And so both East Hillcrest as well as Lindell were chosen so that they were projects far away and they wouldn't impact each other, right? Traffic rerouted from each other. So we have the option of pushing this contract a little bit farther in the calendar. And so I would anticipate, even though we have delays on East Seward Street right now, I do still believe we'll finish quite early, maybe end of August now instead of end of July, due to the phone company having to reroute their cable. But I believe all that work will be completed long before this is started.
We don't want interruption with them two projects.
Correct. So we'll stagger that. We'll for sure stagger that, so.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments from the council? Oh, what entertain a motion?
So moved.
The motion to approve. Is there a second? A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the rest of your votes. Please display the vote.
Voting in favor, Kaler, Tanya, Schofield, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Morgan, 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Item 4, consideration of roofing replacements, RFP recommendation and authorization to award White Castle Roofing. Derek, or did Greg, you wanna take this?
You want me to start, Derek?
Yes.
All right. As was noted, back in May, we approved an RFP for roofing services for our hail damaged roofs from the 2012 June storm. I'm just gonna kind of walk through what we did to get to this point, and then we can answer questions about the response that we got, the process, or talk about any of the other things that are related to it. So, as noted, this is relation to the June 22 hail damage across the city of Seward. In July, adjusters from our insurance provider, EMC, came out on site to review damage and put together a claim. The city received the claim response from EMC in late August, and this was provided to department heads for review of their specific buildings to ensure all the items were included that were actually damaged. So if there were any discrepancies, department heads would deal with that. Throughout the summer and fall of 22 and the winter of 23, the city was directly contacted by numerous roofing companies, including Nelson Contracting, Golden Rule, Connor Roofing, Bill Wright Homes, Conrad Construction, Lily Homes Construction, and White Castle Roofing, about who was going to do our roof work and how the process would take place. Each was informed that a collective RFP would be issued for all roofs needing replacement, and that the city would be working with just one bidder. The purpose for that process was to meet the following goals: to provide for a fair and equitable process for all contractors to bid on the project, especially those with considerable interest; to ensure they're a reputable contractor with experience in Seward, a demonstrable record of quality performance, and the ability to follow up on warranty and other issues would perform the work; and finally, to provide for the best result for taxpayers and ratepayers of the city of Seward. It was determined that the project would be best in spring of 2023, as we were late into the winter of 2022 when that was prepared. City Clerk Bargeman began the process of creating the RFP based on the information provided by our insurance provider EMC as part of the claim. In creation of the RFP, Bargeman contacted a local reputable roofing contractor to ensure all the information that would be provided through the RFP process would be sufficient to allow for any contractor to make a detailed and specific response to the request. This is to avoid confusion and attempt to get things to be as close as apples to apples as possible. Bargeman, along with Bob Core and Tim Dworak, created the RFP that was reviewed by myself and forwarded on to the City Council for approval and advertising. The council approved the RFP on May 2nd and was advertised in the Independent on May 3rd and May 10th and placed on our website as a standard procedure. Bargeman also contacted all of the contractors I previously listed that had stopped by and dropped off their information, and provided a copy of the RFP to them to complete should they choose to do so. The RFP included instructions and listed each location and building that would require work. The city was contacted by one contractor and inquired about a specific itemized listing of repairs that were provided by EMC and if we would share that information. A copy of this information was distributed to all of the contractors, and it's on your table. So if you want to look at it, we provide you a copy. This is what was the follow-up that was provided to everybody. It literally has, 5.22 square feet of tear-off haul and disposal, compact shingles, 3-tab. I mean, you name it, it's got your linear feet, drip edge, ridge cap, linear feet, as was measured out and delivered to us by our insurance provider. And so this was as applied or offered and given to everybody that had taken the RFP as a supplemental. Contractors were encouraged to visit the sites and include and inquire with Public Properties Director Bob Core in regards to any questions about the structures they had. We had numerous contractors request to visit the sites and were given access to all buildings and roofs if requested so. Sealed bids were received and ultimately opened at the advertised time of noon on Friday, May 12th. 4 contractors have responded, and the final bid numbers on May 12th were listed as follows: White Castle Roofing at approximately $233,000, Nelson Contracting at $276,000, Bill Wright Homes at $289,000, and Connor Roofing at $308,000, with a addenda of $315,000 based on a different option for one of the roofs. At that time, the team that created this project and worked on the RFP, Derek, Bob, and Tim, carefully reviewed all the responses to see if prices were similar and if any apparent discrepancies in price or scope were evident. Upon examination, it was determined that while the bids included or excluded certain items, they were essentially as close to apples as possible except for 2 exception properties. The issues for the discrepancies were determined to be as follows. The wastewater administration building that was included was mistakenly included and should have been the water processing building. The second one was the approach the contractors took on City Hall was slightly varied, so the review team believed that a more detailed response was necessary to ensure apples to apples on the City Hall building. Specifically, new decking for the flat roof portion was requested to be included. A supplement to the RFP was created for the above identified issues on May 19th and sent to the 4 responsive bidders with a return date of Thursday, May 25th. This was to ensure that each of the firms in consideration had adequate time to re-examine the sites to prepare that bid item. The city received responses from 3 of the 4 bidders, and the total bid numbers were updated to relay that information. With White Castle Roofing at approximately $290,000, Nelson Contracting at $329,000, and Connor Roofing at $350,000, with that alternate again, raising it to $357,000 if that was selected. At this time, it was again determined that one of the bidders was not submitting an apples-to-apples comparison of the projects, and they were asked to update their numbers based on the requested process for replacement, as was used by the other bidders. Final bid totals came in then as such. White Castle Roofing at $290,000, Connor Roofing at $294,000, or $307,000 with the alternate, and Nelson Contracting at $329,000. Oh, $301,000, my apologies. And then Nelson Contracting at $329,000. There were numerous items that we noted when we went into detail and looked at a lot of the responses, where, for instance, one may have included an additional item that they were aware of or identified that they saw when they came on site. Others didn't include items like gutters or other things that were listed on the detailed sheet breakout. At that time, it was determined that all three remaining bidders that responded to the supplemental RFP were qualified, reputable, and had performed work of this nature in the city of Seward, and that the final deciding factor for recommendation would be bid price. Based upon this, it was recommended that White Castle Roofing be awarded the bid, as they were across the board consistently the lowest bid at all stages of the process, including the final bid tally with all supplements and follow-ups. That leads to where we are tonight. I know we have representatives from different contractors here with us that would like to possibly speak to it, but I wanted to give you a sense of what the process was and what the staff went through to try and get us to today since last summer.
Can you touch on like the statutory framework a little bit about what we were considering with this process?
Our normal process pursuant to ordinance is that on contracts over $30,000, unless we're buying sole source goods, which is basically there's only one person to get it from, that we bid out those projects for those items over $30,000. That's our standard procurement policy. So when we bid out for the fire truck or the pumper truck, we bid that out through an open bid process. We advertise it, we list it on the website. We have certain policies that we try to follow.
And it's good for transparency purposes. The public, obviously you're involved in the specs and the bid proposal, so we have a public meeting on that. So the council's aware, the public's aware, and then when we come back to award the bid, again, you are made aware and the public's made aware. So we have more opportunities to get public input on that process than you would if you just simply went out and awarded it to someone.
But we also wanted to ensure that the responsiveness of the bidders was to somebody that's, we'll say, reputable in regards to, we know that, and Tim will tell you, we had a ton of fly-by-nights fly through because they're just chasing around hail and trying to hit it up and get into town, get as many roofs as they can and get out. And they're based in Texas or California or somewhere else, and they'll just keep moving around. We needed somebody that we could follow up with that had a proven record, and that's why we said the three final bidders are all proven, pulled permits way before any of this hail damage had ever came. And so we felt like all of them were qualified, all of them are completely reputable, do great quality work in the city of Seward before this ever started, and will continue on as we do it. And so that was the process that we laid out. And that's what we followed to try and make sure that we hit those goals that I mentioned at the beginning. I can answer more questions, or we can kind of go through it and then see where it takes us, but.
Go ahead. Any questions from the council?
Did anybody question on the wastewater process unit being, you know, everything else was pretty close with the insurance, but that item E on that process unit, there's about, what, 28,000 difference from the insurance? Is there, did anybody question it at all?
I think on E, it was due to, and I have to find, I think it's, is that in the packet?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
In the packet, Derek had noted regarding property E, all firms noted that the current roofing structure should be all firms should be completely scrapped and instead be replaced with EPDM style roof. Therefore, the higher cost reflects this fact. All other prices are mostly within 25% of the insurance adjuster's price.
I just was hoping somebody questioned it, because that was the one that stood out.
Sir, if possible.
Hold on.
1 second, we'll get to you guys in a second, but we just wanna give the council opportunity first.
No, I just was hoping somebody would have questioned it, that when you saw that from the insurance, what they are dictating. Everything else was so close, but,
Again, and we saw it across the board,
okay.
and so we felt like that was consistent.
Any other questions from the council at this time? Matt, are you bidding on something?
No, I was just scratching my head.
Okay.
Sorry.
Make me nervous.
No, I'm sorry.
No, if that, we wanna,
Oh, one
Yeah,
thing,
Carl?
so when August 22nd of this year is when we got the insurance quote from insurance company adjuster, right? Okay.
And again, some of them were in a state, like I believe the library and the seniors, or the civic center.
Needed to be immediately.
Well, some of the library things were just items that we weren't gonna do because of the damage to the tower, we'll say, and some of the stuff that happened in there. And then we had a definite issue where we were having like leaks and stuff going on in the civic center. It needed to be repaired immediately,
Right.
and so that one was done. But other than those, and the police department, same issue. So, that's how we worked through those, but we wanted to kind of, just because we didn't want to deal with, you know, this many different buildings with a different contractor at every single building. This is the process that we wanted to go through to try and get this one taken care of, so.
Any other questions from the council? Do we continue or open to the public?
I'd open up to the,
Okay, we'll go ahead and open to the public for a comment. We don't normally do this, but we know we have a lot of interest on this particular item, so I wanna make sure anyone that wanted to speak would have an opportunity. If you'd like to, just go to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes, to talk. It does not include if there's questions that you're asked at that time, to clarify that's not an issue, so. I don't know, either one of you or anyone else wants to come forward at this time, you sure can.
Would you like me to? I
Yep,
can address
come to the
the-
podium, then you can, if you wanted to add anything else, or just address the point made earlier, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I'm Steve Keel with White Castle Roofing. Thank you for the opportunity. Regarding roof E, you mentioned that one. There's just multiple, I would hope, and probably these guys would agree, to go back with the insurance. We counted like 27 penetrations on the roof. They're only accounting for 5. They're not accounting for any of the walls, termination on the walls. The square footage was off a little bit, so things like that are the reason, and it's going to a better system. If that
Yeah,
helps.
understand.
Did you want to add anything else at this time?
Just thank you for the opportunity, and we like these guys, you guys did your due diligence, and we're a family-owned business that loves what we do, and we'd love to work with Seward and the city of Seward. So,
All right, thank you. Of course, there's 2 Steves, let's just make this complicated, right?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Steve Connor, Connor Roofing, 1698 Augusta Drive. The bids were, what we determined, about $3,900 difference, okay? I would just like to point out a few discrepancies. Again, with all these variables, with all these different projects, you're gonna have some discrepancies. We all looked at it just a little bit different. However, one in particular, the ice and water shield on the lead center and the swimming pool, it's there, and I know it's there because I roofed them both last time. So they're not included in the insurance paperwork, but I bid them because I know they're there. So we've got $4,600 worth of ice and water shield included in that bid, which when they take that off, they're gonna find it, they're gonna supplement it to the insurance company and add it to the bill. Essentially, with all these discrepancies, essentially what you need to know is, with insurance claims, what you need to do is choose your contractor. We're all gonna do the same thing. We're gonna take your insurance papers, we're gonna look at it, we're gonna negotiate it with your insurance company. Any variables that we see, we're gonna fix. We're gonna look at them and go, what about this, this, and this, the penetrations, the walls, whatever. We're gonna change them all. So that number, that 290, 294, is gonna change. Essentially, all you're gonna pay is your deductible, regardless of what that end number is. Those of you that have had your roof done since the storm, you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't the same number that you had when the insurance company came. That's when it got billed. They all changed. I get that you had to go through a process to pick a contractor. I'm just saying that there are a lot of variabilities out there that haven't been answered for. I'm not, if you're not convinced that that's how it works, that's fine. I'm not saying that you have to choose me, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is with all these variables and all these questions, maybe tonight, if you're not convinced that this, worked out the way it should, maybe we push the vote back until you have all the information. There's more out there than you guys know. And the process, you guys have gone through the process just a little bit differently because you're a government thing and you have to answer to certain people. Once you choose a contractor, it's pretty much a negotiated work and you're gonna pay your deductible, regardless of who you're working with. So, that's all that I ask from you guys is to, maybe consider not doing anything or looking into the numbers a little more closely.
Thanks, Steve, appreciate it. Yeah, unfortunately, we do have fortunately or unfortunately, we do have, we have a process that we do have to follow. A lot of it is statutorily driven. There is some discretion, but, you know, it's very difficult in these situations because, how do we choose a contractor without any kind of a measurement or any kind of a process? And so, while the process, you know, may not be the cleanest or the fairest, and there's always more information, if we wait until we get all the information, I don't know that we ever get all the information, because there's always information changing, as well. But unfortunately, you know, as part of our responsibility, you know, we need to look at what we have in front of us. We did the best we can to make the process fair, so everyone has an opportunity, in compliance with state law and our ordinances. And that's why, you know, even though it is very, small difference between the top two bids, you know, the recommendation was nothing against Connor Roofing at all. It's just because we're going by the lore of the numbers. And so that's how we got to where we are. And that's why it reads the way it does. Greg, do you want to add anything?
No, like I stated in kind of my opening, I'm 100% confident in the final three that were responsive to it, that they performed great work around town. Tim recommended all three of them and said, hey, we're good with any of these getting it. Ultimately, we have to come up with some criteria once we kind of fished out all the other stuff and then unresponsive bidders and all those elements. We had to come up with some criteria to make a selection. And the criteria that was left over from this process was, how did they end up on the numbers looking at everything? We understand it's an insurance claim at the end of the day, but there still needs to be some sort of fair process to make a determination about who it is. And so that's what we came up with. Maybe it needs to be adjusted in the future or different, but that was how we put it together. That's how we issued the RFP when we put it out, and you guys approved it at the beginning of May. But we're open to critique, discussion, questions.
And that's part of the reason why, you know, the staff, which, you know, they spend a lot of time on this, wanting to make sure that when some of the numbers didn't quite look right, to go back, you know, and take the extra effort to go back and see if something was misunderstood either by us or by them, to make sure that we had as close, I know, apples to apples, everyone says, it is what it is, but, you know, to try to get as close, just so that we can present to the council information that, you know, at least can be compared to each other. And so that's how we got to where we are. Any other questions or comments from the council at this time? We need some direction at some point. What you gonna do? To Steve Connor's point, you know, if you want more information, we can always get more information. If you feel that there's something that you want different in the process, we could do that. If you're satisfied with the work that was done and where we are, you can move forward on that. But ultimately, it's up to the council and how you want us to proceed. John?
So when the contractors come in, they all follow the same criteria? They were all, or you just tell them to come in and bid what they thought?
They're all presented the same information. It's just that some of the bids that came in were more itemized or detailed, and some of them, you know, had just a number. And so, you know, to the insurance document that Greg mentioned earlier, some addressed everything very specifically, some listed it and then just had a bottom number. So I wouldn't say that they were all, for lack of a better term, formatted the same. And that's one of the reasons why the staff went back, because on some things that looked like, well, maybe they're missing something here, or maybe they added something in that they didn't need to, because we weren't asking for that. That's why we went back to try, and for lack of a better term, get the formatting as consistent as possible, so you have the apples to apples comparison. That was the intent. Greg, do you want to elaborate on that?
And I'll just say, and Tim can speak to it, because Tim is kind of our resident technical one on this one. We weren't gonna go back and count every roofing nail that they included on their roof. We weren't going to this like minutia level of detail. We were trying to look for major discrepancies where they totally went off in left field. And we felt like, did you not understand what we were asking for? Thus, kind of the three-part consideration to try and get them all sorted into the same silo as much as possible. But, again, the RFP's in your packet, and it showed the initial information, square footage, roofs. I think every single one of the final 3 came out and went and visited them. I think I saw each one of them at City Hall, come up there and risk their lives trying to climb through that. And then the supplement, which you guys have, this was provided, which just is, and I will say the one that wasn't responsive on the 3rd round or the 2nd round was Built Right. If you look at Built Right's bid, and it's in here, it literally looks like they took this document and itemized everything next to it based on the square footage, gave it a price, and then a total building value. Now again, they were also one of the higher ones. Not substantial, I mean, they weren't out of the range of everybody else, but again, they also weren't responsive once we had the follow-up. And so, I think if you went through every single one of them, you could find things that some included and some didn't. And some of them were very specific about what they didn't include. And some you have to go through the details, but we do have detail sheets for, Nelson, for Connor, and for, White Castle. We have the detail sheet that lists, this is what we included in this building, this is what we included in this.
Everybody was provided the same document.
Yes.
So often. And that's what, like anything else we do, everybody gets the same document and then they bid it.
And when one of the contractors asked for a specific document, we didn't just send it to them, we sent it to everybody, kinda like we do with council members. If one council member asks for something, we don't want everyone else to be left in the dark or wondering the same thing, we'll send it to everybody in case you're wondering, why am I getting those random emails? Because John had a question and we answered it for him. But we wanna make sure everyone has that information.
We follow the same criteria we did for anything.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is what Steve would probably speak to, is it's odd because it's an insurance claim on the back end ultimately. That they're gonna go back through, as they all do with all of our roofs, and they're gonna poke and point and look at stuff and say, well, why is this not included, why was this included?
And ultimately, our deductible is our deductible.
Right.
And so that's why the dynamic's a little different this time, because it's not like the lowest bid actually saves the city money. It's the lowest bid is gonna be in relation to the insurance companies.
And this is the same process we do for anything, and most of the time we go with the lowest bidder on, which is for the best deal for the city and our citizens that are paying tax dollars. So my recommendation is go with what the city chose and go with the White Castle roofing for $233,654.
Is it a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay. We motion to approve the White Castle contract.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one comment to ask about, obviously I know two of the people here are residents of the city and stuff, and I don't know where the 3rd person or the other presenter lives. Is there any kind of like precedent or any history on that as far as when companies come here that are represented by residents that actually live in the city versus that don't? Is there any precedent with that?
So when it comes to, like, what you call local businesses or local interest in a contract, typically, state law still dictates a lot of that process, and, you typically are gonna go with the lowest bidder regardless. If it's a situation where the lowest bidder, you have concerns and you can articulate why you don't think they do quality work, or you have some substantial reason why you don't wanna go with them, but you wanna choose, a local person. It gets tricky on the local side because, we run into this with youth baseball. Well, what's the Seward team? Is it the team with Seward, who coaches who live in Seward, a majority of players who live in Seward? What does that look like? Because sometimes construction companies will have an office in a town, but it's an office in the town. It's not their headquarters, but then, they can be a local business. We have people that live in Seward, the owner lives in Seward, and so it's hard when you measure, again, you think this process was convoluted and complicated to find what a local business is, and it can get complicated as well. So I don't have a good answer for that. We do try to use local vendors and local service providers when we can, especially when it's tax dollars that are being spent on that, but it's not a perfect process, unfortunately.
Traditionally, what you see when you see local preference, it's listed as a criteria at the end if all things are equal. If you say, hey, these two bids came in. We're buying a fence for around the ball fields. We got two bids. They're both $70,000 on the nose. These bids are the same. One of them's here. You can give a local preference as long as you also disclosed it ahead of time. It's listed as the criteria, and here's the criteria we'll follow. In the case of two bids that are the same or similar being the final bid, we give a local preference. And I've seen that in places, but it's always basically a tiebreaker at the end. Ultimately, you know, we set out the process the way we did. You know, maybe we need to examine or change it or have discussions on how you guys want to dictate that policy to us in the subsequently. But we felt like we put all the information out we could, and
that's why I asked the question, that everybody got the same spec sheet to go off of, because this is a tough decision. And we do see the Lake Connors and that around town, and like I said, we've always gone with the lowest bid based on what you said. And if there's a discrepancy, that's the only time we've ever changed from the lowest bid. So it's a tough decision for us, it really.
Today hasn't been fun for the administration.
Well, it's not fun for the council either,
No.
right?
No.
So,
Well, it's your turn now.
yeah, but my comment would be, you know, like what you just said before, Greg, is if there was, if the bids came in the same, they maybe a local contractor got preference and stuff, and effectively these bids are, like what's been explained to us, we're gonna pay the deductible, and when you look at that amount of money, percentage wise, they're almost the same,
Right.
right? So it makes it even tougher.
And we know there's gonna be change orders, we know that, because
Well-
anybody that's went through the
Well,
change.
there's gonna be negotiation with the
Yeah.
insurance
Yeah,
company.
it won't be a change order through us, it'll
Right.
be with the
Right,
insurance company.
but you know what I mean, because anybody that lives in Seward, we've all went through the hail damage.
Right.
And nothing was the same, is right. This is tough, this is tough.
Is there any criteria related to capacity or timeline?
we don't have a timeline. We didn't write it in there because, again, our situation is not dire. We're the ones that were, we fixed. So, we could, but we would have had to have done that either in redo the process and add that as one, or listed it. They need to know that they're being judged on how fast they can complete or what the timeline was. So, we didn't disclose that to them or tell them that was a requirement, and so they didn't provide any of that information. So,
And if there are ideas on a better process, please don't keep it to yourself. Let us know in the future, because like I said, we admit this wasn't perfect, but we needed a process, and this is the one that we decided on, so.
Well, I think one of the things is that definitely drives us different than just a normal RFP process is going through insurance.
Right.
I mean, that's the number one thing. I think that if we do look at anything, it'd be, is there a benefit to have a separate process then from that normal RFP, and how we could do that? I don't know, I mean, I don't know, and how many times is that gonna come up? Hopefully not as many. That might be something to look into to see what that could change, but other than that, I think that's just the main thing of really what we're working with and what we're looking at in terms of policy-wise and process-wise. Other than that, I think everything's been straightforward. Everybody's, like, we've been through the process with the same information. Everything's been based off of all of that, and going through, like I said, when we did it with the wellness center and going through the bids and making sure that everything's including and what's not included, it's a tedious process, so, I think, yeah, the only thing would be if we do see a benefit of insurance processing wise rather than just through a normal RFP process for something like a project or something like that, might be something to look into.
What I can just tell you from my own experience, you know, when you apply for law school, you take the LSAT, and they'll tell you there is no correlation between success in law school and your LSAT score. So why do you take the LSAT? Well, they need a way to order you, you know, they need a way to separate you out, and so it's a process that really has no bearing on the outcome, but they need a process, and that's one that they landed on. So
Yep.
again, this isn't a perfect process, but, you know, otherwise, you know, how do you choose? Do you want to add something,
I
Rich?
do. The key here to me is consistency. You know, we bid it the way we've done it in the past, you know, and insurance aside and increasing costs and so forth aside, the bidding process is doing its job. And that's what this is all about for me.
You know, anyone else? We had a motion and a second. If there's any further discussion? Seeing none, be ready for your votes. Please clear the votes.
Voting in favor of Kaler, Tanya's, Coachman, Miller, Singleton, Morgan, voting against Streisand. And that is 6-1.
Item number 5, routine update to the city engineer job description. Derek.
Yeah, so, with Mike on his job description, it has not been updated since February of 2018. Greg and I strive to look through the job descriptions every 5 years or less. And Mike's not leaving us, and we hope he doesn't for a long, long time. So, it came his turn to look at his job description, so we reviewed it with him, noted some changes, tried to make it more readable and get into the same formatting and all that stuff. So you see the red line version that takes out some of the stuff he wasn't doing, he combines stuff. I found the ones that I've inherited have been pretty wordy, so I've been trying to say the same thing or say more with less words, if that makes sense. So we went through that whole process, and ultimately I think it's a lot cleaner than what it was, and it just gives an accurate description of what his current duties are at this time. And that's about all. This should be the last department head one that we have to do. I think I have 2 non-department head ones that I'm knocking out with Brandon Cole, the water wastewater director, and then we should be all up to date. When I inherited it, I think there was maybe a handful out of like 20 or 30 or how many jobs we have here at the city that were up to date. A lot of them were 10 or 20 years old, so it's just been a side project I've been working on gradually. Been doing an audit of them, just kind of noting when they were last updated and checking that every now and again to make sure that when they're coming up to 5 years that we're being on top of that, getting them all into the same format. So that's gonna be an ongoing thing, but once we get this one done and then the 2 water wastewater ones, we should be up to date for a while. And that's about all.
Thanks, Derek. Any questions or comments from the council? Yes, Greg.
I would just note that this is an inherent policy now of the administration as we continue to move forward. Whether it's a permit, whether it's a job description, whether it's any other documentation, we're trying to implement cohesion across the board and uniformity of look. We put as you can see on the job description, it's very clear when the revision date is. We'll have that on all our other documentation as we work through it. And then setting the expectation of how often and how soon that should be reviewed. Where we said 5 years right now, we want to get back to these within the next 5 years again. We're trying to do this with everything because it's much needed. Again, we have another item you're going to see tonight where we literally are creating something that doesn't exist, but it sits in statute. And so we'll tackle that later, but this is a critical element of our review as we look through our policies, our procedures, everything across the board needs to follow kind of this example. So you'll see it again on one of our later items.
Any questions or comments from the council? Otherwise, entertain a motion. Matt?
Well, I guess one comment, I think Mike does a fantastic job in getting back involved with the council back, going back in the days when we didn't have a city engineer, John.
Yeah.
We're so much better off by having him, and so you guys had to kind of convince me of that, coming back on for my second go around and stuff. And I